You're listening to Coast Business Radio with Mike Ryan.
Daniel Gschwind is the CEO of Queensland Tourism Industry Council, which is Queensland's peak tourism industry body. Daniel represents a Queensland Tourism Industry Council on various committees and advisory boards, including the Tourism Research Advisory Board. He's also a member of Jobs Queensland and is the Deputy Chair of the Australian Tourism Industry Council and Chair of the Australian Tourism Awards. Tourism in Queensland is worth more than $27 billion and sustains 237,000 Queensland jobs across more than 55,000 businesses. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be talking to you.
What's the state government risking with tourism and jobs with its stance on keeping the border closed?
Well, Mike, we like to encourage the government to stick with the plan that the Queensland Government released about 2 weeks ago, which mapped out a staged return to business. It is what we had been asking for. Our industry certainly strongly advocated for that, and we were very pleased when the Premier came out with the currently three-stage plan. We've seen one stage implemented with some restaurant openings up to 10 people. The second stage, which is the 12th of June, will see some travel restored to within a 250-kilometre radius with, importantly, overnight stays allowed in commercial accommodation. And then stage 3 was or is forecast to mean on the 10th of July that interstate travel all over Queensland will be possible and, importantly, interstate travel also. That is what the government said. And they, of course, also said all of this is subject to the health indicators progressing at a desirable rate. Now, as far as we're concerned, everything is going reasonably well nationally from an infection rate point of view. So we see no reason why the Queensland Government would divert from this plan and keep the borders closed. And we certainly encourage them daily to, as I said, stick to the plan. And so we fully anticipate there is still a real prospect that the borders will open in July.
September, though, is a month that's even longer than September. Is a word that's been thrown around by various bodies. If we don't have the borders lifted until September, and let's face it, Daniel, we're not going to get rid of the virus. It's going to be here until they have a vaccine, and they may never will. So to say that we want to get rid of the virus and stamp it down and crush it, it's not going to happen. So September really is, it's like go into the naughty quarter and don't come out till September. I mean, what are they supposed to do?
No, you're quite right. I mean, I think the idea, we've been asked to help the government flatten the curve. We accepted that. And look, I give full credit to the national, or the federal and the state governments for doing what they've done. We have kept Australia out of the worst case scenario and we are performing exceptionally well. So full credit to them. But we were asked to flatten the curve and we've done that. That curve is flat. If now the goalposts suddenly change and the health officials are telling us that we can't go back to work until there is zero transmission for a month, then we're in real trouble. And I fear, as you say, that will be so far down the track that, in my case, I might die of old age. Go back to work.
And I'll just be behind you. But the thing is, the federal government says you can open the borders. Various states, this is what I find interesting. They have this big cabinet meeting, and it's a bit like a Monty Python skit. They sit there and go, yes, 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 yes. We all agree. They all go out and do their own thing. So federal government saying, open the borders. Queensland government saying, nah, we want to crush it all. I mean, it's not going to happen, is it? And this confusion, this defiance almost from the federal government is really worrying for such a strong industry.
But it's not helpful when these major policy issues, and they are serious issues. I don't want to take away from it. These are serious issues and seriously difficult decisions for governments to make. But when they drift into a political space, that is certainly a worry. And Mike, we were encouraged by this whole process of a national cabinet, and I think they all played nicely together and they achieved some great outcomes. And that's perhaps even a model for other issues to be tackled. So that was a good thing, and we'd like to go back to that without having this political argy-bargy. And as I said, the Queensland Roadmap to Easing Restrictions, which was its official title, is a good document. So let's just calm down and stick with the facts and stick with the plan and allow us, not just tourism, but all of us, to gradually go back to work.
Sounding like a level-headed Swiss person here. And sometimes we actually need level-headedness. What's been done, though, to change the state government stance?
Look, we're engaging as an organisation, the Queensland Tourism Industry Council, and our members individually in some cases. We're engaging with the government on a daily, at least daily basis. I have actually seen the Premier this week. I have written to the Premier. I engage with the Tourism Minister on a very regular basis. And we make our views and our suggestions very clear. We have to be collaborative, and we're trying to be, and we are very collaborative. And I can say we have a very good relationship, our industry, with the Queensland Government, the great Tourism Minister. So, look, there can be no misunderstanding on the government side what our views are. And certainly we are just reflecting what our industry and our members are telling us. And I've had probably never more calls and push for action from members than in the last week or so, and combined with, I have to say, unfortunately, the level of despair and dismay at the prospect of staying closed until September has really rattled the industry. And we transmitted and explained this very, very clearly to the government.
But if they agree in the National Cabinet and the federal government says borders are not necessary, I don't know what the delay is.
Well, we're all in the hands, it appears, of health officials, the chief health officers in each state, and that is obviously what's the right way to go. We're certainly when at the height of the risk. I think we have to gradually move to more balanced and multi-opinion strategy now, where we have other issues put on the scales of the decision-making process as well. And as we all know, we have to recognize that this comes at an enormous cost, and certainly not just to the tourism industry, but to all of us. The federal and state governments have been extremely generous and prompt and quick with throwing money about, and that's the only thing that's kept us going in our industry, to be fair. So that's been great. But no amount of government subsidy will substitute in the long run the income that businesses must generate to keep the communities going. There is just no way around that. And just to put it into context, Mike, if we look at the domestic tourism market alone in Queensland, just domestic, not internationally, that will be gone for some time. So the domestic market in Queensland would generate, or last year generated per month, $1.6 billion. $1.6 billion. That's 53 million per day in Queensland from domestic tourism. Now, at the moment, it's round about zero. So no amount of government money, government subsidy, is able to sustain or replace the $53 million every single day. That's just not going to happen. So we need to get business back to work.
Will the sector shrink, leaving just the larger players and the smaller businesses, because we are a small business state? So do we see the bigger ones getting bigger and the smaller ones just disappearing?
Look, I think there will be some structural adjustment, as they euphemistically call it normally, but there will be some players that will disappear. I fear that we're at that point now. It's like a person. You can stop eating for a certain amount of time, and you'll make up for it later. But at some point, it's curtains. So. Some businesses are being pushed to that edge now, I fear. So there will be some adjustment. There will be some businesses that may not close, but they will not have the financial capacity or wherewithal to restart. It's sort of one thing to shut a business down or wind it down, but it's quite another to start it up again. And that is not as easy as flicking a switch. So you need to have your staff back in place. You need to have sort of maintenance and refurbishment actions perhaps in place. Your facilities may need adjustment because of the workers' health and safety requirements now. So some businesses will struggle to get going again, and it will certainly take them a long time.
What are the regions that will be hit the hardest? I mean, I would see northern Queensland would be really suffering because it's a long way it's further than the Gold Coast to drive or Brisbane to drive or to get to. So it would mostly be, I would imagine, some ships sometimes coming in, but mainly air and road.
Quite right, Mike. That is absolutely correct. You know, in the southeast corner, at least, we've had the benefit or luxury, if you like, of having a large population centre that can kind of create its own party, and so even sort of visit restaurants. And as from the 12th of June, we'll be able to stay overnight within that 250-kilometre radius. But that's not much relief for some of the more remote places. And think of the outback, think of North Queensland, as you say, the Whitsundays. So it's desperate times. It's really desperate times for them around those places, and they will suffer for a long time. And also to add into this, destinations like tropical North Queensland, Cairns, they had a fairly significant international portion in the tourism mix, and that clearly, as we said, is not likely to be coming back anytime soon.
A real spat with the Chinese government before we go. With the pending trade war, and already they're talking about coal and iron ore next on the hit list. How important is the Chinese market for tourism?
Look, it grew to become the biggest international market for us, and we always looked at that with both, joy, because it obviously kept many businesses and jobs in place here in Australia and in Queensland, but also with a bit of a concern, because when you focus too much on a single market, that brings risks with it. And we've seen that decades ago on the Gold Coast with the Japanese market that boomed and then went very much flat and has never really come back quite to the same extent. So we did learn from that time, and we do have a more balanced portfolio now, but the Chinese market in the international mix is certainly extremely important, or was very important for Queensland and Australia, and I think it will take some time to recover. And again, maybe it will never quite reach the heights in the short term it did before. And the political dispute and rhetoric that's being flung across the South China Sea between the two countries is obviously not helpful. And we know the Chinese government has at its disposal various measures to increase or decrease the passenger traffic out of China into Australia, for instance.
Interesting times. Probably would hate to be in the tourist industry right now, but what can you do? If you're in it, you're in it. So hopefully you don't get swallowed up. September.
We never give up, Mike. We never give up.
No, September, though, is the month we don't want to be looking at for the borders to come down. Daniel Gschwind, the CEO of Queensland Tourism Industry Council, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.